Alright guys, so I'm going to be showing you why I use thinning shears when I'm blending hair. Thinning shears are a game changer for creating smoother and softer fades with more detail. I'm going to be walking you through how and why I use them. When I'm using my thinning shears over comb, I'm using a tapered comb. A tapered comb looks like this. It'll have smaller teeth and eventually get to bigger and larger teeth. I specifically use a tapered comb for either smaller areas that I want to work on or any larger areas that I want to work on. The smaller teeth allow me to get into smaller areas where I want to detail. More so, I use the comb underneath the shears to not only protect the scalp, but to also pick up the hair that I want to cut. So now one of the biggest reasons on why I use my thinning shears is because I can control how much hair I'm blending. Overall, it allows me to control how dark I want to keep certain areas to make my fade better. Not only that, but my thinning shears also help me to avoid the risk of taking my fade way too high with the clipper. For example, if I'm using the wrong guard as a beginner, I'm not sure if that might be the right guard, and I might risk taking the fade too high. Well, now I can gradually blend the hair without pushing the fade too high, keeping that structure of the haircut in place. So an example right here, if I feel like I'm gonna go up too high with the clipper, or I simply just want to keep this area right here of the fade darker, my thinning shears are going to allow me to control that darkness. So I'm going to take my comb and I'm going to go underneath the hair, directly right underneath where I want to cut. Think of your thinning shears as if they're eating that line out, and they're slowly but surely getting rid of that darkness bit by bit. So when I go in and I cut, I can see that it's still too dark. All right, now let me try 2 more snips. It's still kind of dark. So now I can keep going until it starts blending in. And now as you can see, it only took me a few snips to blend that line in. And eventually as I'm moving up, I'm also moving my comb with the thinning shears over it. And I'm making sure I'm always combing the hair down to make sure that I don't mess up the fade or leave any hairs. Overall, I want to make sure that I have a clean canvas at all times. Now here I'm going to show you the flexibility in using my thinning shears over comb, specifically right here, that you can see is a little darker compared to here and here. So now what I can do is I can also angle my comb in that certain direction that I want to cut, or I can also angle my scissors to just get that specific area. What's cool about the thinning shears is that it's not going to cut the hair, it's pretty much taking the weight out and making the dark areas lighter, allowing you to basically customize a fade to however you want it to be. So for example, I'm going to go in here and I can angle my thinning shears to just get that certain area of the fade. Even in smaller areas, I'll switch to my smaller teeth and I'll go right over it. And I'm only getting that small area by literally angling my shears right on that dark spot. So I'm just pretty much munching out that dark spot until it becomes light. And the key here is to not be afraid. If you have to go one swipe, comb, and then another swipe, that's okay. Eventually, the more you repeat it, the more comfortable you'll become in using your thinning shears. Just going in. It's fucking hilarious. All right. Another helpful thing about the thinning shears is that you can also use them to point cut. I personally prefer the thinning shears over the regular shears because the regular shears, oftentimes when you're point cutting, they take more hair off. So for example, in these smaller dark areas here, I can just simply go over it and cut. Open and close, open and close. However, one thing about point cutting with thinning shears is that as you're pulling out, you want to make sure that your scissors are open. You don't want to have them closed and risk yanking a hair out of the scalp. So with my thinning shears, it allows me to go into smaller areas and just make the fade a little more detailed. It can be any little dark area. Eventually you train your eye to see these small spots over time. It's important to also look through your camera because through your camera you can also see a lot of spots that your eye cannot see. Now I'm also going to show you here that I'm also cutting in the angle that I want to structure the fade. So since here it's essentially dropping down like this, I'm having my comb at that same angle that the fade's dropping, since I want to structure the fade to come down here this way. Because if I have my comb like this and I'm cutting like this, I might cut in too deep over here towards the crown, and I'm going to mess up the structure of that fade. So I'm cutting in the direction that I want that structure to be. But one thing I do want to say that's really important is to know when and where to use them. For example, I'm not going to use my thinning shears from, let's say if I had a 0 line to like the length of a 4 or a 5 or any bigger number, right? So if I had just a bald line with this length here, that doesn't make sense. It would just take too much time. I'm literally blending in from that 0 line all the way to that bulk. Overall, I focus on areas where I don't want to risk taking too much hair off, like the top part of the fade or any smaller areas, smaller sections that my clipper might just completely obliterate, right? I mean, yes, I can use the corners, but I prefer to use my thinning shears since it's more flexible. So using them where it makes sense helps me get the perfect finish without overworking the cut. Alright guys, and that concludes on how and why I use my thinning shears over comb to blend the fade.